As we've seen in the Season 3 episode Tender Engines, Henry unfortunately had a pretty humiliating experience with the tenders Duck gave to him. And as I've rewatched that episode recently, it got me thinking, this is not the only time Henry has had problems with tenders.
Bruh, what is that?
So I decided to dig a little deeper and take a look at Henry's tenders throughout the different eras and see how it's changed and how wrong some of the merch was at getting it right at times. And just a heads up, I love Thomas and I love trains, but I am not an expert when it comes to technical details. So if any of this info is wrong, just feel free to correct me in the comments. So Henry in the Railway series has been depicted with two different designs, pre-rebuild and post-rebuild. Before his accident, Henry was depicted with a GNR tender, due to his bases being an early rejected design of a GNR A1 class. And then he crashed. After returning from his rebuild at Crew, he got a Stanier tender, since now he was based on a Black 5. This was mainly due to Audrey not being happy with how inconsistent Henry looked in previous illustrations, so giving Henry an exact basis to base the illustrations on was Audrey's way of making sure Dalby kept Henry's design consistent. Then, for whatever reason, the Stanier tender was later replaced by a Fowler tender. If I had to guess, I imagine this might have been an oversight with the illustrations, since the general shape of a Stanier tender is somewhat close to a Fowler tender. The major difference between the tenders is that the back bit has a bit more length after the slope, leading me to believe that this is what ultimately caused Henry's Stanier tender to kind of morph into a Fowler tender. I could be wrong on that obviously, and maybe it was just a choice that was made behind the scenes, but I don't believe there's a canonical reason as to why they changed it to a Fowler tender in the later illustrations. Now, in the original TV series, Henry's tender is this odd square shape with a bit of a dip at the front, which kind of resembles the Stanier tender without the back part sloping down like it does in real life. Getting onto the merch that was released during the original show's run, there's actually a decent amount to get through. In the Wooden Railway range, all the way from 1993 to 2002, Henry was depicted with a Fowler tender. It wasn't until 2002 where they redesigned him to give him more details, and they took the opportunity to make his tender more accurate. Though, the fact that it took him about 9 years for this to get fixed is kinda crazy to me if I'm being honest. Wood Henry is a whole problem in general, which I know is not a hot take, but his tender is just a Minecraft block. This one is not really a tender problem, but I felt the need to point out how much I love the 2022 Wooden Railway Henry. I only bought James at Barnes & Noble's about 2 years ago now, since that was the only one I kinda cared about getting at the time, but now I kinda regret not buying Henry sooner. It feels like it's kind of getting harder to find stuff from this range at a fair price now, so if anybody knows where I can get him for a good price, please let me know in the comments. Next, pretty much all of the diecast ranges since the beginning have had accurate television series tenders, which is great. That was until we got to the Adventures range. This Henry is how you know that at this point in time, they didn't really give a damn about the toys anymore. For whatever reason, they give him a Fowler tender again, after so many years of somewhat accurate Henry tenders. And obviously, this was due to them reusing the collectible Railway line as a base for these Adventures releases, but it does really show how bad the merch was at this time, that they didn't even bother to fix it for Adventures, to at least make it a little more accurate. Playrail and Trackmaster have really good Henry tenders, and I would say none of them are really bad. Even the Trackmaster 2 one is okay, despite being kind of squashed. But I would like to point out the 2011 Talking Henry, which has a really long tender to accommodate the batteries and whatever other components to make him talk, which I personally think makes him look really neat. In the HO scale Thomas lines, Bachmann does a perfect job at replicating TV series Henry's tender, as that's what it's based off of. Hornby, however, gave him an accurate Stanier tender, which is due to them creating these models to look accurate to their real life counterparts, which I think is a cool idea for the whole Hornby range, but I'm personally not a fan of some of the models, as I think they look kind of odd in my opinion. All Engines Go not having Henry be a relevant character in the show meant that he didn't get a lot of care put into his redesign. Being a quick recolor of Gordon, he ended up having a Fowler tender throughout the whole run of the show, and obviously, this was carried over to all his All Engines Go merch. Well first, I'd like to say it's kinda shocking that Henry not only got one, but 2 pieces of merch, despite not talking in the show at all. But something I find interesting is how they didn't fix Henry's tender on this merch to make him more accurate in the same way they fixed Edward's design with his push along. I think this was due to All Engines Go Edward's design being kind of ridiculous in the first place, especially with the length and the amount of wheels he has, and that was probably not possible to make, so they opted to make him smaller, like he originally was. Throwing these 2 here since I forgot to mention them before, but both the Tommy Trains Henry and the My First Thomas Henry have a Fowler tender. The first version of Henry having a Fowler tender in the My First Thomas range is kind of passable as the whole range is meant for toddlers, and they most likely just reused it as they already made it for Gordon and probably thought it wasn't that necessary to make a whole new tender just for one character. Then there's also the Tommy Trains Henry, which kind of exists. The Tommy Trains range as a whole was always kind of strange, as it's something I've always seen around as a kid, like online and stuff, but I never really looked into it besides that. Not gonna lie, I think Ming is the only recognizable thing from this range. And those are most of Henry's tender problems, at least that I could find or thought were worth mentioning. If there's any that I forgot about, please let me know in the comments. And let's just hope that Henry doesn't have any more tender problems after this. Some updates on upcoming videos. I still haven't filmed the Playrail James unboxing. I know, I'm sorry for procrastinating, but that will be out soon. Then I also ordered something else to unbox, which hasn't arrived yet. It's a slightly older item from the Trackmaster 2 range, which probably doesn't sound too interesting, I know, but there is another video that will kind of go with that one as well. I'll be keeping that a secret for a little bit longer, but I hope you guys will enjoy it when the time comes. Thank you guys again for all your continued support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.